You know what? Actually, I haven't really watched much of the Winter Olympics. The only thing that I watched was for maybe like 30 minutes. It was curling. It was like on in the
Mm,
background during a dinner party. And the reality is like everyone was talking about, what are the rules and does sweeping in front of the little circular thing speed it up or slow it down? It was like more of an academic exercise around like just understanding what curling was. Otherwise, like I just learned from you that the US hockey team, the women's hockey team just won the gold. Welcome to the Wellable Weekly podcast, where we talk about key topics and trends at the intersection of well-being, technology, and HR. I'm Nick, along with my good friend Geoff. And if you're paying attention to the FDA, last week was pretty big news around some crackdowns they had on compound pharmacies and GLP-1s. To be honest with you, I'm kind of shocked that we're this far into the year without a single episode talking about GLP-1s, but
yeah,
you know, better late than never. But before we
here we
get
are.
into yeah, before we get into the topic and like discuss everything, I always think it's helpful to like do a State of the Union, especially for something like GLP-1s that's just changing so quickly. So thinking about just adoption, the Kaiser Family Foundation had a really good study. I think it was released in November of 2025 about just usage. And so a couple just data points here: 18% of U.S. adults have used GLP-1s, 12% are currently using that or currently using the drug. Just given the growth of it, these numbers change quickly. I know we're only, what, 4 months, 3 or 4 months since the report, but I imagine, quite frankly, that they changed, at least some. What's also interesting is like, why are people using these drugs? Uh, if you recall, the original use case for GLP-1s was for diabetes. And so, of the people of that 12% currently using GLP-1s, 45% are using for diabetes, 29% are using it for heart disease, 23% are using it for being for overweight or being obese, which is a little bit odd because I feel like in the news, the weight and obese use case is like the one that gets the most attention, I think. And then, yeah, and then 3% are just none of the above. I think the one thing missing with this data, or just kind of lumped in maybe on the obesity use case, is there's a lot of least noise in the media around people using it for vanity reasons, for reasons of I just want to look better, and you would think that's higher than 3%. And I think if I was going to try to create this survey and kind of get these results, where I would want to capture that information is under the other category, but 3% just strikes me as really low for that.
Yeah. I mean, at the risk of trying to draw a direct parallel between GLP-1s and our favorite topic, AI, they both seem to have a place in popular culture and are just highly relevant, whether you're thinking about it through the lens of your day-to-day personal life or through the eyes of an employer who might be trying to figure out coverage of GLP-1s for their workers. And so similarly, KFF is all over this stuff. Found a couple stats from uh, Peterson KFF Health System Tracker. One in five, just under 19% firms with over 200 employees actually cover GLP-1s for weight loss, right? Definitely some more coverage with larger companies, but right around 20% for those mid-sized businesses. And then if you think about the like gatekeeper programs or what you need to do in order to get access to GLP-1s through your employer, typically that's a clinical support program, some type of lifestyle, nutrition or other kind of wellness related course. One in three firms are requiring that, which probably a little lower than maybe both you and I would have expected. But in any case, whether it's a firm that's covering this already or has some programs that employees have to go through before they get access to cover GLP-1s, anytime there's a real newsworthy announcement like this that could impact accessibility or availability of those drugs, I'm sure everyone is going to stand up and take notice.
Agreed. So on to the topic. So last week, the FDA announced some crackdowns on the active pharmaceutical ingredients found in GLP-1s, and why that is relevant is that there's such demand for this product. You know, and even looking at the stats, I think like you mentioned, 19% of employers are covering it. There's just so much demand that a huge market has been kind of created from like direct to consumer, both like Novo Nordisk and other pharmaceutical companies creating a direct to consumer product, as well as like direct to consumer companies like compound pharmacies have gotten into the market to kind of fill that void of where demand is exceeding supply, right? And so that certainly was the case 12 months ago, even 24 months ago, and kind of the early history of GLP-1s hitting the market. Today, less so because supply chain issues have kind of caught up, but still certainly a not an easy pharmaceutical drug to necessarily get. But the FDA previously had two of the key ingredients found in GLP-1s on this list. And so, just for background, like I did not even know what a compound pharmacy was exactly. I think I've heard the term and just kind of nodded in my head. But apparently, compound pharmacies are allowed without FDA approval, which is like the real key thing. You don't need FDA approval. Allowed to do a couple things. Like commonly, they make customized medications. So if someone can't take a pill, for example, of a drug they need, a compound pharmacy could create a different dose, or they could create a cream or something that's an alternative, but designed to do the same thing as a FDA approved drug for specific use cases for like a very individualized or customized opportunity. The other one, which is like the bigger market in some cases, is creating drugs where there is a supply chain issue or a supply issue in general, where there's not just
Mm.
enough of it to meet the demand. And so early in the GLP-1 history, I think Novo Nordisk was the only pharmaceutical company that had an option. It was Ozempic, so often people use the two terms interchangeably. And the Ozempic
Right.
drug was an injection, right? Now you have Wegovy, which is Novo Nordisk's pill format. And if I remember correctly, Novo Nordisk and Wegovy uh, is the only pill GLP-1 pill on the market today. I think there are a lot of other ones in approval phase of the FDA that you can use for the obesity use case. There's another one, I forget which group has it, that's used for diabetes, but it's not approved for weight loss. And so, as you imagine, companies like Hims and Hers, which is like a very, very famous compound pharmacy. It's like a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company. They have telemedicine. They get you approved for certain drugs, and they ship you subscriptions for things like hair loss, women's health, et cetera. They entered this market because they recognized there was a huge amount of demand for it, and they started with just an injection. The FDA, they're just about to release a pill as well, but the FDA removed these two ingredients from this compound pharmacy ingredient list. And if it's on the
Mm.
list, you can use it without FDA approval. The minute it's off the list, you need some type of FDA approval to use it. So by removing it, it kind of really disrupts the Hims and Hers market for weight loss drugs. Hims and Hers already announced they are not going to go to market with the pill anymore. And there's just a lot of rumors saying that they're going to pull their injection product from the market. I don't see how you don't pull it if one of the ingredients is on the list, or one of the ingredients in the product was on the list and is no longer on the list. But assuming they're out of the market, it's just going to remove some supply that people are relying on to get access to these type of drugs.
Right, and Hims and Hers, of course, is the focal point of the latest FDA crackdown. But they're not the only compound
Yeah,
pharmacy out there, and certainly the ripple effects of this type of announcement, where if you have certain ingredients that are now not approved by the FDA in those GLP-1s or semaglutides, you're really not looking at a viable product that you can bring to market anymore. So whether they have to re-engineer it or temporarily halt releases of planned products, that has to have an impact on availability through the consumer market, and largely a consumer market that was more affordable, right, than some of even the out-of-pocket costs you would pay if you had GLP-1s covered by your employer. So, I mean, certainly, again, makes me think, what is going to be the reaction in the broader workforce for those who are seeking out these drugs one way or another? Is the demand going to increase, and pressure that we know already exists across your average employer today to cover them in some way or another? Is that pressure only going to ramp up? And what will employers do in the face of mounting pressure? Well, one approach would be, this could be the tipping point where you start to think about seriously think about coverage. But in that same health system tracker, KFF reporting that again, 2/3 of firms saying that GLP-1 drug coverage moderately or significantly impacted their prescription drug spending.
Mm.
So employers have to think if they're prepared to take on that type of expense. And if they are they going to join the right now, about a third of companies who are mandating that you have some type of lifestyle management or clinical condition support program before you can get access to them.
I was just surprised by that stat, the one third. If I would have to have guessed, I would have thought more would have done it for kind of two reasons. One, in theory, it lowers costs, right? And I don't think that this is the right approach. I just think it's the reality of the situation is that, many employers are thinking about GLP-1s in two ways. One, we're going to increase our pharmacy spend, but we're going to benefit from the fact that we have better management of diabetes, heart disease, weight loss, et cetera. And we'll see the gains elsewhere in terms of financially, right? The other group is saying, wow, this is a big like pharmaceutical spend increase. How do we manage this? And we create some type of hurdle that prevents people from participating or getting access to the coverage. We'll insert a lifestyle management program. Again, I don't think this is like the right idea to set up your program because I think these lifestyle management programs have a real purpose, right? If you're on GLP-1s, you could probably have good outcomes if you just take the drug and don't really do much and just let it work its magic. But if
Mm.
you say you recognize and provide resources for nutrition support unique to individuals who are on this drug. You provide support and resources around physical activity. With this level of weight loss, you will lose muscle as well, not just fat. And so having individuals be very cognizant of that fact and actively participate in exercise and things is really, really important. And there's a
Mm.
laundry list of things that you could do from a lifestyle management program that would take the good potential outcomes of taking a GLP-1 and make them to like the best possible outcome. And so knowing that, I think the employers, if it's only one third doing it today, I predict that more than one third will do it because one, some people just view it as a way to limit costs, but two, I think individuals who are trying to get the best or companies trying to get the best outcomes are going to gravitate toward this. And one of the reasons 2/3 did not, I'm guessing, is that it's just complicated. All of a sudden, you're going to add coverage to this new drug and then you want to layer on this program, that's a lot to digest at once. So some of these companies that have already provided coverage may retroactively come in and say, now that we've gotten our bearings about the situation, usage, et cetera, we want to do something that is a benefit to us as well as a benefit to you, the employee. And we're going to create this lifestyle management program that serves as a gatekeeper, so to speak, to getting the coverage people want.
And the benefit to the employee is really the mindset I think that a lot of employers have adopted. In addition to trying to support individuals with maintaining healthy weight for health outcomes, it's also just a general satisfaction model. This same again KFF report that for those employers who are currently covering GLP-1s for weight loss, it's either important or very important for employee satisfaction. So again, this report is obviously before there a potential crunch on accessibility in the consumer market. So again, I think that pressure on employers is only going to ramp up.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that's one of the things I think is so interesting about health and well-being industry. Like we're so focused in our day-to-day of thinking about how do we move the needle on people's health and how do we move the needle on, the benefits of having a healthier workforce, whether it's productivity or lower healthcare costs and things like that. But sometimes it's just a demand thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our employees are demanding it, so we want to get it, and it's completely um, goes around this whole ecosystem of information that you and I are constantly living in for why an employer should do it. So it's just another example of how like you end up in the right place, but maybe not always for the reasons you would suspect.
Right.
One thing I think this is the most interesting stat about GLP-1s. I don't know why, but like I just always remember this. And there are a lot of different estimates, but I'll use the one that I think is the most conservative. But there was like a Jeffries study saying that, assuming GLP-1s continue their adoption, et cetera, that airlines, so like, domestic US airlines will save $580 million in fuel expenses because the average or total weight of the passengers on a plane will be lower, right? So I think the example they gave was a 10% reduction of the average weight of the individuals in a plane could lead to 1.5% reduction in fuel costs. And you're talking about tens of billions of dollars in annual fuel costs that these airlines have. So even the smallest reduction is going to result in a very, very meaningful, in this case, hundreds of millions of dollars of extra profit. And that comes by the airline doing nothing. The airline didn't make lighter planes or improve their operations, or Boeing didn't improve the fuel efficiency of a plane. None of that happened in the industry. Something happened on this completely other island in healthcare and has a huge, huge impact on these airlines. And it's one of those
Mm.
things where, you know, I personally think that if AI wasn't the business news of the day, literally every single day for the last
Yeah.
year plus, the number one news story would be GLP-1s. And I think there's a strong argument. And I think I would honestly, I think I'd probably fall in the bucket of making this that in the next, call it 2, 3, maybe even 4 years, the impact GLP-1s will have on the country, the economy, everything like that is in excess of what the impact AI will have. Now, AI may have a bigger impact in the long run. It may wholesale replace jobs or drastically reduce the workforce and all these things that may not be desirable and desirable in some ways as well. But
Mm.
today, as we see it, you have businesses that have nothing to do with healthcare in many ways have huge impacts as it relates to um, just the GLP-1 movement, and we're still in the early days. I can't emphasize that enough.
Right.
You're talking about 19% of companies are covering it. Only 18% have used it. 12% are currently using it. You're talking about a huge number of people that eventually could be on a drug like this and have really meaningful benefits.
Yeah. Well, it seems like you and I are going to have a lot to talk about these next few years. Hopefully, airline ticket prices coming down with all those savings they're going to be getting, but probably won't
Yeah,
count on
another
that.
benefit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it seems like a great place to wrap up. Thanks as always for those who are listening. Feel free to subscribe to Wellable Weekly on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to check out the Wellable Weekly newsletter as well. Thank you.